Corinne Whitfield didn't even hesitate. She held the check between her fingers like it was something dirty. Then she looked at the man across the counter and smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind people use when they already believe they're right. $10 million, she said loudly enough for half the bank to hear. And you expect me to believe this is real? The lobby had gone quiet. A businessman near the rope barrier leaned closer. Two tellers stopped typing. Everyone was watching now. The man in front of Corinne didn't look like someone who carried $10 million checks. His jacket collar was worn thin, boots scuffed, hands rough from years of work. Corinne lifted the paper higher so the nearby customers could see. "This," she said, tapping the amount with her nail, "is the kind of check wealthy clients deposit." Her eyes moved slowly from the number to his boots. "You don't look like one of them." A few people chuckled. The man didn't react. He simply said, "Please verify the account." Corinne laughed, a cold, quick laugh. "Oh, I already called." She leaned closer over the marble counter. "The account exists," she said. Then her voice hardened. "But that doesn't mean you belong anywhere near it." A murmur spread through the lobby. The security guard had stepped closer now. Corinne lifted the check again, holding it between both hands. "You know what usually happens," she said loudly, "when someone walks in dressed like this trying to deposit a fake check?" She looked around at the watching crowd. "We call the police." The man's expression didn't change. "Then verify it properly," he said. Corinne tilted her head. "You really think I'm going to waste more time on this?" He met her eyes calmly. "Yes." That calmness seemed to irritate her more than anger would have. Corinne turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, voice dripping with sarcasm, "today's fraud attempt is apparently worth $10 million. More laughter. The businessman near the line shook his head. "Unbelievable," he muttered. Corinne looked back at the man. "What's your name?" "Daniel Moore." "Occupation?" "Software developer." Someone in the line snorted. Corinne smirked. "A software developer from the West Side, earning $10 million. She tapped the check again. "You expect us to believe that?" Daniel said nothing. The silence stretched. Corinne's smile sharpened. "I think you found this check," she said. "Or maybe someone paid you to try your luck." "That's not what happened." "Oh, really?" She leaned closer. "Because people who earn $10 million don't walk into banks wearing jackets like that." That line landed exactly how she wanted. People nodded. Someone whispered, "She's right." Daniel looked at the check for a moment. 2 years of work. Late nights while Lily slept in the next room. Weekends spent coding while other parents took their kids to parks. All of it written in black ink across one piece of paper. He lifted his eyes. "Give it back," he said quietly. Corinne's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me." "My check." Corinne shook her head slowly. "No." The word was soft but final. She raised the check again. "You know what I think of fraud." And before anyone could react, she tore it. The sound of ripping paper snapped through the marble lobby. Gasps. Corinne didn't stop. She tore it again. And again. Pieces of the $10 million check fluttered down onto the counter like confetti. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." The security guard froze mid-step. Corinne brushed the pieces aside with the back of her hand. "There," she said, "problem solved." Daniel stared at the scraps. His future, shredded just like that. Not stolen, not lost, destroyed. Because someone had decided he didn't look rich enough to deserve proof. His hands trembled slightly. He slid them into his jacket pockets. "That was my property," he said. Corinne crossed her arms. "That was a fraudulent instrument." "You didn't verify it." "I didn't need to." "You destroyed $10 million. Corinne gave a short laugh. "No," she said, "I destroyed a scam." The security guard stepped closer. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Daniel didn't move. He looked around the lobby. Every face was watching, but none of them were on his side. They'd already decided who he was. just another desperate man trying to cheat the system. Karen gestured toward the door. Escort him out. The guard reached for Daniel's arm. Daniel stepped back. Don't touch me. The guard paused. Daniel looked back at the shredded paper. 2 years. Gone. He slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Karen rolled her eyes. Oh, please, she said. You're going to call a lawyer now. Daniel didn't answer. He tapped the screen calmly. Karen folded her arms. You can call whoever you want, she said. It won't change the fact that you tried to commit fraud in my bank. Daniel finally looked up. His voice was quiet, almost calm. You shouldn't have done that. Karen smirked. Why? Daniel slipped the phone back into his pocket. Because that check, he said, was the least expensive way this could have gone. Karen blinked. For the first time, the smile on her face faded slightly. What does that mean? Daniel glanced toward the glass doors of the bank. A black town car was pulling up outside. He looked back at her. You're about to find out. Karen followed his gaze toward the glass doors. The black town car outside had stopped directly in front of the bank entrance. The driver stepped out first, opened the rear door. A woman in a gray suit stepped onto the sidewalk. She moved with the kind of quiet authority people didn't question. Karen scoffed. Nice timing, she said. You're right here to pick you up. Daniel didn't answer. Across the lobby, the security guard shifted uneasily. The doors opened. The woman walked inside. Conversation across the bank dropped to whispers. People noticed her immediately, not because she raised her voice, because the tellers straightened the moment they saw her. The assistant manager rushed from behind the counter. Good afternoon, Ms. Cross. Karen's smirk froze. Daniel watched her expression change in slow stages. Confusion, recognition, concern, because everyone who worked at Rivergate National knew the name Evelyn Cross. Regional director, 30 branches, one signature could end a career. Evelyn's eyes swept the lobby once, quick, sharp. Then they landed on the counter, on the pieces of the torn check, then on Daniel, then on Karen. What happened here? She asked. Her voice was calm, but the kind of calm that made people nervous. Karen recovered quickly. Just a routine fraud situation, she said. Evelyn walked closer. Her heels clicked across the marble floor. Fraud. She reached the counter and looked down at the shredded pieces. What exactly was fraudulent? Karen pointed toward Daniel. This man attempted to deposit a fake $10 million check. Murmurs rippled again. Evelyn didn't react. Instead, she asked one question. Did you verify it? Karen hesitated. For security reasons. That wasn't my question. Karen straightened. The account exists, but the issuing bank could not confirm the check without. So you destroyed it. Karen lifted her chin. Yes. The word echoed through the lobby. Evelyn stared at the torn paper, then slowly picked up one piece. Another. She examined the fragments. Routing number, escrow account watermark, signature, all real. Her eyes moved to Daniel. You're Mr. Moore. Yes. Did you attempt to deposit this check? Yes. Karen jumped in. And I refused it because the circumstances were suspicious. Evelyn didn't look at her. Did you verify the issuing bank? Karen crossed her arms. I called them. And? They said the account exists, but... Did they say the check was fake? Karen's jaw tightened. No. The lobby was silent now. Evelyn placed the torn pieces carefully on the counter. Miss Whitfield, she said quietly, do you understand what you've done? Karen's confidence returned. Yes. I protected the bank. A few customers nodded. The businessman from earlier stepped forward slightly. Honestly, he said, it did look suspicious. Karen gestured toward him like a witness. Exactly. She turned back to Evelyn. People who have $10 million don't walk in dressed like that. The words hung in the air. Daniel felt every eye turn toward his jacket. His boots, his hands. Evelyn slowly turned her head toward Karen. Is that your professional assessment? Karen didn't hesitate. Yes. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she asked Daniel a question. What do you do for work, Mr. Moore? Software security. For whom? Private investment groups. Corinne laughed. Of course he does. Evelyn ignored her. How long was the contract that produced this check? 2 years. The businessman frowned. 2 years for $10 million. Daniel nodded once. Evelyn studied him carefully. Then she looked at Corinne. You called the issuing bank, correct? Yes. What did they say when you gave them the account number? Corinne sighed impatiently. They said the escrow account is active. And did you ask who controls that escrow? Corinne hesitated again. No. Evelyn reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her phone. Then she dialed a number from memory. The entire lobby listened. Hello, Evelyn said. This is Evelyn Cross with Rivergate National. Pause. Yes, I'm standing in our Stonebridge branch. Another pause. I need confirmation regarding escrow account number. She read the number from one of the check fragments. Everyone watched Corinne's face as Evelyn listened. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Then Evelyn spoke again. Yes. Thank you. She ended the call. Corinne crossed her arms. Well. Evelyn looked directly at her. That escrow account belongs to Blackridge Capital. The name landed like a stone. The businessman's eyes widened. Even the security guard looked surprised. Blackridge Capital was not a small company. It was one of the most powerful investment funds in the country. Corinne's confidence cracked slightly. That doesn't prove anything. Evelyn nodded slowly. You're right. Then she looked at Daniel again. Mr. Moore. Yes. Did Blackridge hire you to design their new network security system? Daniel blinked once. How did you know? Evelyn gave a small sigh. Because I was in the meeting where they approved the contract. Silence exploded through the lobby. Corinne stared at her. What? Evelyn turned to the watching customers. Blackridge has been developing a new internal financial security architecture for 2 years. She pointed toward Daniel, and this man built it. Corinne shook her head. That's impossible. Evelyn picked up another piece of the check. Actually, she said calmly, it's extremely possible. Corinne's voice rose. But look at him. Evelyn finally faced her fully, and her voice dropped. Yes, she said, let's talk about that. Because what you just destroyed. She lifted the torn fragments. Was payment for the man who designed the digital security system protecting every major account our bank handles with Blackridge Capital. The room went completely still. Corinne stared at the pieces of paper, then at Daniel, then back at Evelyn. But that doesn't make sense. Evelyn's eyes hardened. No. It makes perfect sense. Daniel watched Corinne's face as realization began to crawl across it. But Evelyn wasn't finished. She turned slightly toward the security guard. Thomas. Yes, ma'am. Please close the front doors. Corinne blinked. Why? Evelyn looked back at her. Because, she said, we now have a very serious problem. Corinne frowned. What problem? Evelyn set the torn pieces of the check back on the counter. Then she looked directly at Daniel and asked the question that made Corinne's stomach drop. Mr. Moore, did the security system you built for Blackridge already go live? Daniel nodded slowly. Yesterday. Evelyn inhaled once. Then she turned back toward Corinne. You just destroyed the only proof that our bank properly processed the payment for the man who controls the security system, protecting billions of dollars in Blackridge assets. Corinne's face drained of color. What does that mean? Daniel answered quietly. It means, he said, that starting tomorrow morning, Blackridge's system may flag Rivergate National as a hostile financial environment. Corinne blinked. What? Daniel held her eyes. And if that happens, he said softly, Every Blackridge transaction with this bank automatically freezes. The businessman whispered under his breath, "Jesus." Corinne stared at him. That would never happen. Daniel shrugged slightly. "You tore up the check." Evelyn's voice cut through the silence. "Corinne." The manager turned slowly. "Yes." Evelyn's expression was cold now. "Do you have any idea how much money Blackridge moves through this bank every week?" Corinne swallowed. "No." Evelyn answered for her. "About $3 billion. Corinne's knees almost buckled. Daniel slipped his hands back into his jacket pockets. Calm, patient. Then he said one quiet sentence. "The system reviews payment verification records every 24 hours. Corinne's voice trembled. "What happens if it doesn't find one?" Daniel looked at the shredded paper on the counter, then back at her. "You're about to find out." No one in the lobby moved. It felt like the entire bank had stopped breathing. Corinne Whitfield stared at Daniel as if she were trying to solve a puzzle that had suddenly become very dangerous. "That's ridiculous," she said finally. Her voice sounded thinner now. "A bank doesn't get frozen because of one check." Daniel didn't argue, he simply looked at Evelyn. Evelyn Cross already understood. That was the terrifying part. She stepped closer to the counter. "Mr. Moore," she said carefully, "please explain exactly how this system works." Daniel took a slow breath. He didn't enjoy attention, but right now the entire room was waiting. "The network I built for Blackridge," he said, "monitors transaction environments." Corinne scoffed. "That's just basic cybersecurity." Daniel nodded slightly. "Most systems look for outside attacks." He tapped one of the torn check pieces. "This one looks for internal risk." The businessman leaned closer. "What does that mean?" Daniel answered without looking at him. "It evaluates behavior from financial institutions handling Blackridge funds." Corinne crossed her arms again. "That still doesn't." Evelyn raised a hand. "Let him finish." Daniel continued. "If a bank demonstrates hostile activity toward a verified Blackridge contractor." He paused. "The system automatically flags the bank as compromised." Corinne blinked. "That's insane." "It's precaution." "And what exactly counts as hostile activity?" she demanded. Daniel pointed to the shredded paper. "Destroying verified payment instruments is one example." A murmur rolled through the room. Corinne shook her head rapidly. "You can't prove that." Daniel met her eyes. "You tore it up on camera." The words landed like a hammer. Every security camera in the ceiling suddenly felt very real. Corinne turned toward Evelyn. "You're not actually taking this seriously, are you?" Evelyn's expression was grim. "I was present at the contract briefing 2 years ago." Corinne frowned. So I remember the clause." Daniel nodded slightly. "Blackridge insisted on autonomous protection." Corinne looked between them. "What clause?" Evelyn spoke slowly. "If the system detects institutional hostility." All automated financial bridges with that institution pause. The businessman's voice cracked. "Pause." Daniel corrected him. "Freeze." The older couple near the line whispered to each other. Corinne forced a laugh. $3 billion doesn't freeze because a branch manager rejected a check. Daniel shrugged. "That depends." "On what?" "Whether the system logs the action." Corinne looked at Evelyn. "Tell me you're not buying this." Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the security guard. "Thomas." "Yes, ma'am." "Pull up the lobby footage from the last hour." Corinne snapped. "You can't just—" Evelyn cut her off. "Actually, I can." Thomas hurried toward the security office. Corinne's breathing had changed now. Fast, shallow. "This is insane," she muttered. Daniel watched quietly. Across the lobby, customers had forgotten their transactions completely. Phones were out now. Someone was recording. Corinne noticed. "Put that away." She snapped. But the man didn't move. No one did. Evelyn spoke again. "Mr. Moore." Yes. Does the system verify payment completion automatically? Daniel nodded. It checks confirmation logs. Karen pointed to the shredded check. Well, that's impossible now. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Yes. Karen blinked. What does that mean? It means the system will look for proof that the payment was processed. Karen forced a smile, and it won't find any. Daniel's voice stayed calm. Exactly. Evelyn inhaled slowly. When does the system run its verification cycle? Daniel checked his watch. Midnight. Karen laughed again, but this time the sound cracked. So we have 6 hours, she said. 6 hours before nothing happens. Daniel didn't respond. Evelyn looked at him. Is there a way to manually verify payment? Yes. Karen jumped in. Great, then do it. Daniel shook his head slightly. Not from here. Karen stared. Why not? Because the verification requires the original transaction record. Evelyn looked down at the counter, at the torn check pieces. Understanding hit her like a wave. Karen followed her gaze, then it hit her too. The lobby went silent again. Karen whispered, No. Daniel's voice was gentle. You destroyed it. Karen suddenly slammed her hand on the counter. This is ridiculous. The shout echoed through the bank. You're telling me the entire bank is going to lose billions because of a piece of paper? Daniel shook his head. No. Karen leaned closer. Then what? Daniel answered quietly, because of a decision. Before Karen could respond, Thomas came rushing back from the security office. His face was pale. Ms. Cross. Evelyn turned. Yes. The footage. What about it? Thomas swallowed. It already uploaded to the transaction verification cloud. Karen frowned. What does that mean? Daniel's stomach tightened. That means the system already saw it. Karen looked between them. You're bluffing. Daniel pulled his phone from his pocket. He tapped the screen, opened a secure app. Karen rolled her eyes. Oh good, more theater. Daniel didn't look up. The screen loaded. Lines of encrypted text appeared. Then a red notification. He read it silently. Evelyn noticed. Mr. Moore. Daniel lifted his eyes. The room waited. What does it say? Daniel showed her the phone. Her face drained of color. Karen's voice trembled. What? Evelyn read the alert slowly. Blackridge security protocol, risk detection triggered. The businessman whispered, Oh no. Karen shook her head violently. That doesn't mean anything. Daniel scrolled. Another alert appeared and another. Evelyn spoke again. Financial Bridge Review. Rivergate National flagged for investigation. Karen's breathing turned ragged. That's impossible. Daniel continued reading. Then he said the words that made the entire lobby go cold. The freeze begins in. He checked the countdown timer. 5 hours and 43 minutes. Karen grabbed the edge of the counter. No. Daniel slipped the phone back into his pocket. Customers stared at Karen. The same crowd that had laughed earlier. Now they looked terrified. The businessman stepped back. My company uses Rivergate. The older woman whispered, Our retirement account. Karen's voice cracked. This is your fault. Daniel looked at her calmly. My fault. You built this system. You destroyed the verification. Karen shook her head wildly. We can fix it. Evelyn looked at her. How? Karen opened her mouth, closed it, then finally whispered, We get another check. Daniel shook his head slowly. It doesn't work like that. Karen's voice rose again. Then what does it take? Daniel answered quietly, The original proof. Karen stared at the shredded pieces on the counter. Her hands started shaking. No. Evelyn spoke softly. Karen. Karen looked up. Yes. Evelyn's voice was deadly calm. You might have just started the largest banking freeze in this city's history. Karen's face turned ghost white. Daniel picked up one tiny scrap of the torn check, just a corner, part of the routing number still visible. He held it up between two fingers and said one sentence that made Corinne's heart drop straight into her stomach. "This is the only proof your bank ever had." Corinne Whitfield's hand shot across the counter. She grabbed the tiny scrap of paper from Daniel's fingers. "No," she said quickly. "No, no, no." Her voice had changed. The confidence was gone. Now it sounded like panic. She began scooping up the other pieces from the counter. Little white fragments, numbers, ink, the remains of a $10 million check. "Just tape it together," she said breathlessly. "That's all we have to do." Nobody moved. The businessman who had laughed earlier looked sick now. The older couple stared at the shredded paper like it was radioactive. Daniel watched Corinne silently as she tried to line up the pieces. But there were too many. Some had fallen to the floor, others had been swept aside. One piece had landed near the velvet rope. Corinne crouched down and grabbed it. "This is fine," she muttered. "It's fixable." Evelyn Cross stepped closer. "Corinne." Corinne ignored her. "We'll reconstruct it," she continued. "Then we scan it." She looked up at Daniel. "That works, right?" Daniel didn't answer. Corinne's voice sharpened. "Right." Daniel spoke gently. "The system requires the original document." Corinne froze. "What?" "The intact instrument." Her breathing quickened again. "But we have the pieces." Daniel shook his head. "That's not the same thing." Corinne looked at Evelyn desperately. "Tell him to reissue the check." Evelyn's voice was steady. "That isn't his decision." Corinne snapped her head toward Daniel. "Then call whoever issued it." Daniel stayed calm. "They don't take calls." Corinne stared at him. "You're joking." "No." The lobby was so quiet the hum of the lights could be heard. Corinne stood slowly. "This is ridiculous." She pointed at him. "You're enjoying this." Daniel's voice stayed even. "No." "Then fix it." "I can't." Corinne turned to Evelyn. "Make him fix it." Evelyn didn't move. "What exactly do you want me to do?" "Order him." Evelyn's expression hardened. "He isn't our employee." Corinne ran a hand through her hair. "Then we call Blackridge." Evelyn shook her head slowly. "They won't answer." Corinne laughed weakly. "Of course they will." Evelyn's voice dropped. "Corinne, you don't understand how Blackridge operates." Daniel watched her carefully. Evelyn continued. "They hired outside contractors for that system specifically so they wouldn't have to intervene." Corinne's stomach twisted. "What does that mean?" Daniel answered. "It means the system runs without human interference." Corinne's voice rose again. "That's insane." Daniel shrugged slightly. "It's secure." Corinne slammed the counter. "We cannot lose $3 billion over this." The businessman stepped back another step. "My company uses that pipeline," he whispered. Someone else said, "So does ours." Phones were definitely recording now. Corinne noticed too late. Her entire career was collapsing in front of witnesses. She turned toward Daniel again. "You set this up." Daniel frowned. "What?" "You came here knowing this would happen." "That's not true." "You wanted to humiliate me." Daniel shook his head. "I came to deposit a check." Corinne pointed to the shredded paper. "Then why would a system freeze billions over this?" Daniel answered simply. "Because banks aren't supposed to destroy payments." Corinne had no response. Across the room, Thomas returned again, this time holding a tablet. "Ms. Cross." Evelyn turned. "Yes." The alert spread. Corinne's head snapped toward him. "What alert?" Thomas looked uncomfortable. "The verification cloud just updated." Evelyn took the tablet, her face tightened. Corinne stepped forward. "What does it say?" Evelyn read quietly. "Blackridge automated review triggered. Financial bridge status pending suspension." Corinne whispered, "No." Daniel asked calmly. How long now? Evelyn checked the countdown. 5 hours. Karen felt dizzy. 5 hours. 5 hours before billions froze. 5 hours before corporate headquarters demanded answers. 5 hours before someone asked who destroyed the check. Her. Always her. Karen suddenly turned to Daniel again. Listen. Her tone had changed completely now. Soft, almost pleading. Mr. Moore, Daniel. Daniel said nothing. I made a mistake. The words sounded painful in her mouth, but mistakes can be fixed. Daniel waited. Karen leaned closer. I'll personally guarantee the deposit. That won't matter. I'll sign anything. That won't matter. Karen's eyes were desperate now. What will? Daniel looked at the counter, at the torn paper, at the fragments of ink. Proof. Karen swallowed. Then help me recreate it. Daniel shook his head slowly. You destroyed it. Karen felt anger creeping back through the panic. So that's it. You're just going to let the bank collapse. Daniel met her eyes. You made the decision. Karen's voice rose again. Because you walked in here looking like. She stopped herself, too late. The sentence hung unfinished, but everyone knew how it ended. Daniel looked at her quietly. Evelyn looked away. The businessman stared at the floor. Karen's shoulders dropped. For the first time since the confrontation started. She looked small, then Evelyn spoke. Mr. Moore. Daniel turned. Yes. There may be one option. Karen's head snapped up. What? Evelyn looked at Daniel carefully. If the contractor confirms payment manually. Daniel finished the thought. The system can clear the flag. Karen grabbed the counter. Yes. She pointed at Daniel. Do it. Daniel tilted his head. That depends. Karen blinked. On what? Daniel looked around the lobby, at the customers, the cameras, the shredded paper, then back at Karen. On whether I want to. Karen stared at him. You have to. Daniel shook his head. No. Karen whispered. Why not? Daniel's voice stayed quiet. Because 10 minutes ago you called me a criminal. Karen swallowed. And now? Daniel answered calmly. Now you're asking the criminal to save your bank. Karen's face burned. Evelyn spoke softly. Mr. Moore, what would it take? Daniel thought for a moment. The room held its breath. Then he said something that made Karen's heart stop. First, Daniel said. We're going to talk about what really happened here. Karen frowned. What do you mean? Daniel looked directly at her. You didn't reject that check because it looked fake. Karen stiffened. Yes, I did. Daniel shook his head. No. He pointed gently to his jacket. You rejected it because of this. The silence in the lobby turned heavy. Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Daniel's voice stayed calm. You already decided who I was before I even reached the counter. Karen whispered. That's not. But Daniel continued. And the only reason we're still talking right now. He gestured toward the countdown timer on Evelyn's tablet. Is because your assumption destroyed the only proof your bank had. Karen stared at the timer. 4 hours, 58 minutes. Daniel slipped his hands into his pockets again. Then he said the one sentence that made Karen feel like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. So before I decide whether to fix this, I want everyone here to hear exactly why you tore that check. The lobby went completely silent. Even the sound of typing from the teller stations had stopped. Everyone was listening now. Daniel Moore stood calmly beside the counter. Karen Whitfield stood on the other side of it, surrounded by the shredded pieces of the check she had destroyed. Evelyn Cross held the tablet with the countdown timer glowing red. 4 hours, 56 minutes. Karen looked around the room. People were staring. Phones were recording. This wasn't just a bank lobby anymore. It felt like a courtroom. Daniel spoke quietly. Miss Whitfield. Karen swallowed. Yes. Why did you tear the check? Corinne opened her mouth, closed it again. Daniel waited, the silence stretched. Finally, she said the safest thing she could think of, because it looked fraudulent. Daniel nodded slowly. And why did it look fraudulent? Corinne's eyes flicked toward the crowd, then back to him. Because it was unusual. Daniel tilted his head. Unusual how? Corinne's voice grew tight. The amount. Daniel gestured toward the businessman who had laughed earlier. Is 10 million unusual in a bank? The man shifted uncomfortably. No, he muttered. Daniel looked back at Corinne. So it wasn't the amount. Corinne's fingers tightened against the counter. It was suspicious. Daniel stayed calm. What made it suspicious? Corinne's eyes darted to Evelyn. Evelyn said nothing. Daniel waited again. The room felt heavier every second. Finally, Corinne snapped. Because you didn't look like someone who had $10 million. The words echoed. No one moved. Daniel nodded once. Thank you. Corinne blinked. For what? For saying it out loud. The businessman looked away. The older couple stared at the floor. Evelyn's expression had turned to stone. Daniel continued. You didn't verify the check. Corinne said nothing. You didn't call the issuing bank again. Still nothing. You didn't check the contract. Corinne's voice was barely audible. No. Daniel finished the thought for her. You looked at my jacket. Corinne closed her eyes briefly. Daniel gestured to the room. And you decided. The security cameras hummed quietly overhead. Corinne looked around again. For the first time, she realized something terrible. Everyone here had just heard the truth, not the polite version, the real one. Her voice cracked. I was trying to protect the bank. Daniel nodded gently. From people like me. Corinne didn't answer. The timer on Evelyn's tablet ticked down. 4 hours, 51 minutes. The businessman spoke quietly. My company moves payroll through Rivergate. Another customer added. So does ours. A woman near the entrance whispered. My retirement fund. Corinne's breathing became shallow. The entire room was suddenly aware of the same thing. $3 billion, frozen, because of one decision. Daniel finally turned to Evelyn. Do you still want my help? Evelyn answered immediately, yes. Corinne looked at him desperately, please. It was the first time she had said that word since he walked into the bank. Daniel studied her face, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just quiet observation. Then he said something no one expected. I'll fix it. Corinne sagged with relief. Oh, thank God. But Daniel raised one finger. One condition. Corinne nodded quickly. Anything. Daniel turned slowly, looking at the customers, the tellers, the security guard. Every witness in the room. Then he looked back at Corinne. You apologize. Corinne blinked. I already. Daniel shook his head. No. He gestured toward the lobby. Not to me. Corinne's stomach dropped. Daniel's voice was calm. To everyone. The realization hit her. Public humiliation. The same thing she had done to him. Evelyn said nothing. She simply waited. Corinne's face flushed deep red. You can't be serious. Daniel said nothing. The timer dropped again. 4 hours, 48 minutes. Corinne looked around the room, all those faces, all those cameras. Her entire career had been built on control, authority, respect. And now the only way to save it was to admit she had been wrong. Daniel didn't rush her, he simply waited. Finally, Corinne stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, unsteady. I made a mistake. The lobby listened. I judged someone based on how they looked. Her hands trembled. I assumed something that wasn't true. She glanced at Daniel, then back at the room, and because of that assumption. Her voice broke slightly. I destroyed a legitimate check. The silence was absolute. Corinne swallowed hard. I was wrong. She looked at Daniel. I'm sorry. Daniel studied her for a moment, then he nodded. Evelyn glanced at the tablet. 4 hours, 46 minutes. Daniel pulled out his phone. Karen leaned forward. "What are you doing?" Daniel opened the secure app again. The same encrypted interface appeared. Evelyn watched carefully. "Is that the contractor console?" Daniel nodded. Karen whispered, "You really can fix this?" Daniel didn't answer. He typed a long command. Lines of code flashed across the screen. The businessman leaned closer. "What is that?" Daniel explained simply. "Manual verification override." Karen held her breath. Daniel paused. One final prompt appeared on the screen. "Confirm institutional trust status." He looked up at Karen, then at Evelyn, then at the room full of witnesses. Karen whispered, "Please." Daniel tapped the screen. The app processed. 3 seconds, 5 seconds. Then a green notification appeared. Verification accepted. Evelyn looked at her tablet. The red warning disappeared. Karen gasped. The timer vanished. The financial bridge was restored. The lobby erupted with relieved chatter. The businessman exhaled loudly. "Oh, thank God." Karen leaned against the counter, her legs shaking. "It's over." Daniel slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Yes." Karen wiped sweat from her forehead. "You saved the bank." Daniel shook his head. "No." Karen frowned. "What?" Daniel looked calmly at her. "I saved the customers." Evelyn watched him carefully. Karen forced a weak smile. "Well, thank you." Daniel picked up one last scrap of the destroyed check, just a tiny piece. Then he said something that made Karen's heart drop again. "You should probably start looking for another job." Karen blinked. "What?" Evelyn sighed, because she already knew what was coming. Daniel held up the scrap of paper. "You forgot something." Karen frowned. "What?" Daniel's voice stayed quiet. "The system doesn't just log financial risk." Karen felt the cold creeping back. "What else does it log?" Daniel met her eyes. "Behavior." Karen's stomach turned. Daniel finished the sentence slowly. "And the video of what happened here." He glanced up at the security cameras. "Was automatically uploaded when the risk alert triggered." Karen's voice trembled. "Uploaded where?" Daniel answered calmly, "To Blackridge." The room went silent again. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, because she already knew what that meant. Karen whispered, "They saw it." Daniel nodded, "Yes." Karen felt the last piece of control disappear. "What happens now?" Daniel gave a small shrug. "That depends." Karen's voice barely existed now. "On what?" Daniel looked toward the front doors of the bank, where another black car had just pulled up outside. Then he said quietly, "On how Blackridge responds." Every head in the lobby turned toward the glass doors. Outside, the black car had stopped at the curb, not the same one as earlier. This one was longer, darker. 2 men stepped out first, security. Then the rear door opened. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped onto the sidewalk. He moved slowly, like someone who never rushed for anyone. Karen Whitfield felt the last bit of color drain from her face. "Who is that?" she whispered. Evelyn Cross didn't answer immediately, because she already knew. The man walked through the doors. The moment he stepped inside, something changed in the room. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet gravity. The kind that came from people who controlled things most others never even saw. The security guard straightened. The tellers stopped moving. The businessman muttered under his breath, "Oh no." The man approached the counter. His eyes went first to Daniel, then to the shredded paper still scattered across the marble surface, then to Karen, finally to Evelyn, "Ms. Cross." His voice was calm. Evelyn nodded, "Mr. Hale." Karen blinked, "Who is?" Then the name hit her. Marcus Hale, Chief Operations Director, Blackridge Capital. Karen's legs nearly gave out. The man responsible for moving billions through global financial systems, standing in her branch, looking at the shredded remains of a $10 million payment. Marcus Hale picked up one of the fragments, examined it. Then he looked at Daniel. "Mr. Moore." Daniel nodded once. Mr. Hale. Karen stared between them. You know each other. Marcus Hale's expression remained neutral. Mr. Moore built the most advanced financial security architecture our company has ever used. Karen's stomach twisted. Marcus continued, 2 years of development. He glanced at the torn pieces again, which I understand was destroyed. No one spoke. Karen opened her mouth. I was protecting. Marcus raised one finger. She stopped immediately. He turned toward Daniel. Did the system alert trigger? Daniel nodded. Yes. Was it resolved? Yes. Marcus gave a small nod. Good. He looked back at Evelyn. Blackridge appreciates the swift resolution. Evelyn answered carefully. We appreciate Mr. Moore's cooperation. Marcus studied the room. Then his eyes settled on Karen. Miss Whitfield. Karen felt like her throat had closed. Yes. Marcus held up the scrap of the destroyed check. Would you like to explain this? Karen forced the words out. I believe the check was fraudulent. Marcus asked one quiet question. And what led you to that belief? Karen's mind raced, but there was nowhere left to hide. His appearance. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. Marcus Hale placed the paper fragment back on the counter. Then he said something calmly. Blackridge Capital moves $3 billion a week through Rivergate National. Karen nodded weakly. Marcus continued, but we don't choose our partners based on appearance. He turned toward Daniel. Mr. Moore. Yes. You had the right to allow the freeze to proceed. Karen's eyes widened. What? Marcus didn't look at her. You would have been fully justified. Daniel stayed quiet. Marcus continued. Our system would have shut down every Blackridge transaction with this bank within 6 hours. Karen's breathing turned ragged again. But you prevented that. Daniel nodded slightly. Marcus studied him. Why? Daniel answered simply. Because the customers here didn't deserve to lose access to their money. The businessman in the line whispered. Thank you. Marcus nodded once. That was the correct decision. Then he turned back to Evelyn. However, Karen's heart began racing again. The incident itself still occurred. Evelyn straightened. Yes. Marcus gestured toward the security cameras. Our compliance department has already reviewed the footage. Karen whispered. Oh God. Marcus finally looked directly at her. Miss Whitfield. Karen felt frozen. Yes. Marcus's voice stayed calm. Blackridge cannot continue financial operations with institutions that allow this type of behavior. Karen's eyes widened. You're pulling the account. Marcus shook his head slightly. No. Karen exhaled, but Marcus wasn't finished. We're pulling you. Karen blinked. What? Marcus continued. Blackridge requires that any employee involved in discriminatory financial obstruction be permanently barred from managing accounts connected to our capital. Karen stared at him. That's not possible. Marcus looked at Evelyn. Is it? Evelyn answered quietly. No. Karen felt the ground slipping again. Marcus finished the sentence. Effective immediately, Miss Whitfield is prohibited from employment at any financial institution managing Blackridge assets. Karen's voice cracked. That's half the banks in the country. Marcus nodded once. Yes. Karen looked at Evelyn, desperate. You can't let him do this. Evelyn's voice was calm. I don't control Blackridge compliance decisions. Karen looked at Daniel. You're really going to let this happen? Daniel studied her quietly. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke. You tore up my future in under 10 seconds. Karen's eyes filled with panic. That was a mistake. Daniel nodded. Yes. Karen whispered. So forgive me. Daniel looked around the room, at the customers who had watched everything, at the cameras, at the shredded paper. Then he said quietly, I already did. Karen blinked. What? Daniel gestured toward Marcus. That's why the bank is still operating. Marcus nodded. He's correct. Karen's voice shook. Then why am I being punished? Daniel answered calmly. Because forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Karen had no response. Marcus turned to Evelyn. Blackridge will continue business with Rivergate National. Relief swept across the room again. Marcus added one final sentence. Provided Mr. Moore personally approves the partnership moving forward. Karen stared. You're giving him that authority. Marcus nodded. He earned it. Daniel said nothing. Marcus extended his hand. Mr. Moore. Daniel shook it. Congratulations. For what? Marcus gave a rare small smile. For becoming the only contractor in our system authorized to approve or deny institutional trust flags. The businessman whispered. So he could shut the whole bank down if he wanted. Marcus nodded once. Daniel released the handshake. Then he said the line that people in that lobby would repeat for years. The biggest mistake powerful people make. He glanced at Karen. Is assuming the quiet person in the room has no power. Karen stood frozen. Marcus turned toward the door. His security team followed. The black car outside waited. Before stepping out, Marcus looked back at Daniel one last time. Your new check will arrive tomorrow morning. Daniel nodded. Thank you. Marcus left. The doors closed behind him. The lobby slowly returned to life. Customers started talking again. Phones lowered. Transactions resumed. Evelyn turned to Daniel. Mr. Moore. Daniel looked at her. Yes. She smiled slightly. I think you'll find your account here will be handled very carefully from now on. Daniel gave a small nod. I'd appreciate that. Across the room, Thomas the security guard approached. Sir. Daniel looked up. Thank you for staying calm earlier. Daniel shrugged. I had a lot of practice. Thomas smiled. Daniel walked toward the doors. Outside, the evening air felt lighter. His phone buzzed. A message from Lily. Did you have a good day? Daniel smiled. He typed back. It got better. Then he started walking home. Because tomorrow the money would arrive, but tonight. He still had cookies waiting, and that mattered more than $10 million.